So with numerous games now being delayed at a moment's notice, I'm starting to see this new type of conversation start to emerge where a lot of people are sort of criticizing when games are finally announced versus the length of time it takes for those games to finally come out on the market. And it's especially as prominent today because of the whole COVID pandemic and how much that's really affected the industry as a whole. A lot of developers are now working from home, so on and so forth. But, I see a lot of people make the criticism that, they shouldn't announce a game so early because it's not fair to make us wait, as well as, just having no news for what feels like years sometimes. And just to bring up a few examples, I mean, Dying Light 2 was announced in 2018, and we barely know any more information about it. Here we are, almost 3 years later in 2021. It's actually crazy to think about how long that game was announced ago. And, the developers have been hard at work on it. They did say that there was an update this year, that they will have an update for us soon after being super quiet about it, but there are other games, for example, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. That game has unfortunately gotten severe development issues where it's now changed hands to a completely different developer. The game is delayed indefinitely. We don't even know when it will be coming out. That was originally supposed to be coming out in the first quarter of 2020. And then, it was delayed basically at a moment's notice, without any notice for a very, very long time. We didn't know what was going on with that game. And of course, a lot of people want to bring up Cyberpunk 2077 and how long ago that game was announced. But I see people on both sides of the fence here. And then the sort of rebuttal to this is a lot of people are sort of criticizing the complainers, saying that they should just be patient about it. It's just a game. Wait, there are other games to play. And I myself, I definitely feel that as well because, I have a large backlog of games to play. And I can tell you guys right now that I am not itching for new type of gameplay experiences. I don't have any issue going back to either replay games I really enjoyed or go to my collection of older titles that I may have missed or played, years ago and revisiting those. So for me, it's not so much of a big deal. It's just, I guess I'm more used to waiting because for a long time, when it came to game releases, I was so far behind with my backlog, and it's only now that I'm starting to catch up. But I'm so used to playing games, almost a year after they were released to the public and everyone's really experienced them. So I can see that people, who aren't sort of used to that, or, people who get really excited over experiences, they really want to play the games, and it makes sense. I'm excited for stuff coming up. I know everyone has like that one particular game that they're super looking forward to. It's just a matter of making sure that when we get the game, it's at least a quality experience. And that's the main thing for me. The game, when it comes out, needs to be in a functioning, working state. It needs to be a quality experience. And I find this is so, too unfortunately commonplace today, where we have a lot of games that are releasing that are sort of half-assed, there's glitches here and there, and then developers have this release now, patch it later mentality. And, we've seen a lot of games really affected by those decision makings. And I think it really hurts the trust of the consumers as well, because honestly, in no other industry, no other medium would it be acceptable to release a game in an unpolished state or to release anything in an unpolished state. It's like, imagine if you purchased a movie and then the movie started skipping and you weren't able to watch like half of the film because it was just completely broken. The way that they rendered the film and put it on the disc, there was some type of issues. And then the movie company's like, yeah, we'll patch it later, just don't worry about it. Like, it wouldn't ever be acceptable anywhere else. But of course, in the gaming industry, with how variable video games are, this is something that we unfortunately do deal with. And I think that it really has to, this industry really has to grow a lot before we start seeing massive changes. We're already seeing this industry really, really grow in terms of the accessibility, the amount of people who would be considered gamers and play video games. It's grown a lot, but the business practices are still very much sort of amateurish, where people take advantage of the consumer quite often. We have games released in, again, very broken, buggy states, and the developers, there's not really good communication on either end of the spectrum. So I really, feel for the situation and what's going on from the consumer perspective, me being one of them. At the same time, I understand how variable games are to make, and that's something we also have to really keep in mind. Video games are the most resource intensive task because you're simulating life. And it is a live, interactable, source of entertainment that separates itself from just something that's kind of repetitive and always on standby. It's something that can be accessed sort of at your leisure. A movie will always be the same no matter how many times you watch it. It is the same experience. It is a copy of a film that was rendered in an offline state. A video game can change drastically just depending on your inputs and your approach to different things. I mean, even in linear games, there is still a level of variability you have to contend with. Even though people are going in the same general direction, people may, go somewhere else or explore in a different area or try to, do something else that's completely different to someone others playthrough. So it's a massive. There's a lot of variability that you really have to contend for when it comes to game development and game making and all that stuff. And I definitely understand that from a technical standpoint, it can be very difficult to pinpoint and test really all the bugs in the experience. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is just extensive user testing. So ultimately, I mean, for me personally, right, I don't mind when a game so much is announced. And I have always been sort of I've been accustomed to really waiting to play games. So for me, it's not as big of a deal. It's not as big of a deal that Dying Light 2 got announced, years ago, and that we still haven't heard any information on the game. I mean, I want to play the game just the same as any of you guys, and I'm really looking forward to Dying Light 2. Dying Light was one of my favorite games of the last generation. But honestly, if they said, listen, we're going to need another 3 to 4 years making this game, that wouldn't upset me as a consumer. I mean, yeah, it sucks you have to wait to play the game, that long. But for me, it's like, I'm not sitting here, like I said, itching for new gameplay experiences. I got stuff that I could definitely play and hold me over. And there's other stuff coming out, But again, not everyone is like that. I think the general consumer probably purchases a handful of games a year, if that. And, when they invest in a game, they really invest their time into it. It's something that they sit there and that they enjoy somewhat casually, whatnot, But to them, it's like this is an experience that they are really going to be investing their time into. Opposed to someone like myself, where I feel like, I'm in it for the story experience and the storytelling and just the whole, experiencing the game. But once I'm finished with the storytelling, once I'm finished with the main narrative of the campaign and going through those missions and, going through and finally seeing the end credits of the game, once I'm done and reached that point, I really don't find myself returning to those types of games at all. I just sort of move on to the next thing. The only rare exception would be in the case of some multiplayer games. For example, I just beat Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War over the weekend. And, that might be a game that I return to every once in a while, when I just have downtime to just sort of play the multiplayer somewhat casually. But it's definitely not what it used to be for me, which, back when I was a lot younger and, I wasn't making money. I didn't have a job and stuff, and I had to rely on really my parents and gifts for getting new gameplay experiences. I would really invest my time into those types of video games, and I would play games for a lot longer, a lot more religiously and hardcore, in order to get the most out of the experience to hold me over until I can finally get a new video game, as my birthday or Christmas or something would come along that would yield that possibility. So I see it from both sides of the spectrum. I mean, I guess really the question here is, what is the acceptable time frame? Because I brought up Dying Light 2 and I brought up Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which is delayed indefinitely again. I brought up those games, and there are many others and stuff that have also been announced that we have yet to hear any information on. We're still waiting for these experiences. But like to you guys who you do find it rather upsetting and rather annoying whenever a developer sits there and announces something that could be like 5 years away, let's say, what do you feel is the acceptable time frame in your opinion? Do you think it's somewhere like a year, or maybe even less than a year, 6 months or so? Like, what is the acceptable time frame for when a game gets announced to when it finally gets released to the public? I think at the end of the day that what's really important is ensuring that the gameplay experiences we get are quality experiences. And just because a game is delayed massively, it does not ensure that the game experience will be completely patched up and perfect and fixed. We saw a lot of that, especially a couple generations ago. Who remembers like Duke Nukem Forever and Aliens Colonial Marines from Gearbox? Those games were in developments for upwards of a decade plus, constantly getting delayed, and they still released in a buggy, rather unpolished state. So it's never really guaranteed that just because a game is delayed immensely from the time it was announced all the way through. I mean, Cyberpunk 2077, right? Another example there. Even though that game had such a significant development cycle and with such a significant team behind it, it never guarantees that you're going to get a quality experience. And so, in that case, I can definitely understand why it is annoying. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. What do you feel is the acceptable time frame for when a game is announced? And we'll go on from there. All right. Thank you all so much for watching. Have an awesome day, and we'll talk soon.